Well, so far through this, as I've said, I have not seen a lot of this series that I don't think completely justifies the high praise that I've seen it get. And to be fair, some of those reviewers did acknowledge some of the weaknesses of it, the ones that I've watched and what have you. But almost to the end now, and I had said that the fourth episode I thought was the best, and it's the most cohesive unto itself, and how good that one was. But this latest one, called Vox, is a pretty good contender, and of course a lot of it is the fulfillment of what fans of the next generation would like to see, especially the ending of this episode. But it's in keeping with the idea of it, because this is a goodbye series and a reunion of that old cast. It's one more adventure with them and all that sort of thing. And of course, yes, had this been season one, this would be much more appreciated, and that Star Trek would be in a much better position. A lot of comparisons at the moment are going between it and Star Wars, because there's always been that comparison, I suppose. But at the current state of the two franchises, all of a sudden, it, for the most part, at least in this aspect of this one season of Picard, which is a goodbye to Picard story, Star Trek is back. You know, it looks better. It's better than Star Wars and all that. And that's could easily be very fleeting, because the announcements of new shows don't sound so great to me, and they'll be right back where they started. But yes, it's this odd mirror between Picard and The Mandalorian, because The Mandalorian, those first two seasons, are leaps and bounds superior to anything Picard seasons 1 and 2 was. Seasons 1 and 2 of Picard are just raw sewage. It's terrible. But season 3 comes along with very little money. Probably not enough material overall for the number of episodes. But just by the comparison and the objective comparison between the two, Picard is just much better. Mandalorian has completely lost its direction. It's flailing about. There's little drips and drabs of story that might have worked, but now is just annoying people, most notably the Bo-Katan story, which I think was a necessary element to it as far as her own personal story, but not, it shouldn't have been at the expense of Din Djarin, but that appears to be the case, and all that, but overall it's just flailing about with no real serious direction, whereas Picard in season 3 definitely does. There's flaws in it. There's failures here and there. Some things I can see why it really annoys people. Kirk's skeleton and stuff like that. It's just, I don't, whatever. But objectively, again, because there's a lot of stuff about this I don't like, it's just better. It's just better than Mandalorian now. And wouldn't have thought that. Wouldn't have conceived that could happen, because even if Star Wars wasn't going to be fixed, that the least you could do was maintain Mandalorian as this space cowboy story. No, couldn't do that. Whereas here in Picard, the exact opposite. He gave us the crap that was everything, against just about everything Star Trek's about, and then now you give us something that's not completely Star Trek and not really on par with the excellence that the Next Generation series had achieved, but still, at best, it's an adequate space show, and that's just much better than where it was. But this particular episode, for the most part, was kind of firing on all cylinders. They actually got to go other places, more or less. We get to see, what was behind the red door, and it was the most blatantly obvious things. There was other possibilities that there was something to do with the Changelings, but that was a bit of a stretch, since the Changeling and Dominion War was more Deep Space Nine and not Next Generation, even though this is in the same era and all that, and Worf was involved in that and stuff like that. But then what else could it be? At the outset, I thought maybe this would be a follow-up on those bizarre parasitic creatures that had invaded the Federation earlier on, and they, the trust no one line and all that. But no, we're back to the Borg. And sometimes this is like, oh, is this a yet another secret hideout and bad robot trope? Red door, red thing, red queen, red angel, red matter, So behind the red door was a Borg cube, and the deal is of course this goes back to Locutus, and one of the big breakout triumphs of the old Next Generation show was the best of both worlds. But I imagine this idea of Star Trek villains that weighs heavy with the likes of Bad Robot and Secret Hideout, and hey, what's the Darth Vader of Star Trek? And they thought that was Khan. What's the Khan of Next Generation? Well, it's the Borg. Of course, they threw in Moriarty, they threw in lore, but the defense of it would simply be that this was the most devastating attack on Picard personally, and what they forced him to do, and the really powerful performances there that Patrick Stewart did after that in the aftermath. Revisiting it, I think it's considered First Contact is the best of the Next Generation films, even though it's not very good either. It doesn't really hold a candle to the excellence that the TV show had achieved. It was, Die Hard in space and that type of thing. And it tread old material, and it introduced the Borg Queen, and well, okay, but you're making it more of of a villain type character of the Borg overall, when really it was their collective and everything. But it is the biggest challenge to Picard that he ever faced, and it's the kind of thing that, yes, it would haunt him forever. And it's a means by which the plot here of what the Borg did to him and how this plays out with, he didn't really have their aeronomic or aromatic, never get aromatic syndrome. But it wasn't. It was a contingency plan that they had left in place. And they weaved it through his son, and created this new hybrid creature out of Borg DNA and human DNA. And this contingency plan of them infiltrating the transporter data, and they're able to take over just about the entire fleet and turn it on the Federation and what have you. So that's interesting. But it's also an interesting thing, and you could easily make that an analogy for today. And it shows that, the older people are not affected by it. So that's why you got to have this old crew to ride to the rescue. And, but also, hey, the younger people are easily manipulated by the collective and technology. Hey, sound familiar? TikTok and stuff. Anyway, so I don't know if that was the full intention, but it certainly works that way. And that's why it works for me, And, well, the rest of it, they got to escape. Their young crew members turn on them and they have to leave. And then Geordi says, oh, we got to find an old ship that's not connected to the network and everything. And you know where that's going. They'd already visited it, and Geordi was the chief of that museum, so it plays out. It's thought out, and of course they get back to their original Enterprise, and of course they go to it that the saucer section had been recovered. It did survive. It crashed, but the bottom section exploded, but the saucer section survived. They salvaged it. He's been repairing it and restoring it using parts of other Galaxy class vessels, and restored it. And so now they're back home. They've restored the bridge. It's their old bridge. The lights are on. You can see it. And they're flying off to the rescue by the end of the episode. So, it's a good one. I still think the fourth one, just overall, just in and of itself, is good. But this one, it certainly would be greatly enjoyed by fans of the Next Generation because of the full circle, if you will, of the reunion of these characters. The other development was poor Captain Shaw dies in helping them escape, and he passes on command to Seven and calls her Seven of Nine in his dying words. So, hey, made peace with her and all that. If there was a spinoff, I kind of like the idea of the a-hole captain. That's an a-hole, but does the right thing, has a heart of gold, just doesn't want anyone to know it. That sort of thing. But they so it was an interesting concept and template for a character, but they didn't really play it out as well, and they undercut him several times, and they really made a mistake, I think, when he just gave up rather easily and was just stuck, being held prisoner by the changelings and stuff. They cut him down too much, and so now he's dead. So of course, again, they could just put his brain in a positronic brain and give him an android body. But so it's got some flaws and bumps and misses here and there, but overall, pretty good episode. Interestingly enough, with the Borg Queen, and they made mention that they hadn't heard from the Borg in over 10 years. Well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because that's not how season 2 ended. Are they saying this is 10 years after that one? Because, what's her name? Alison Pill, the character. I've already forgot what, Dr. Girardi or whatever. She's the Borg Queen now. So, well, what happened there? But which I'm fine with, because I just let's just pretend that never happened, except, of course, Picard's android body is still very much an aspect of the show. I would have been fine if they just didn't acknowledge the first 2 seasons and started over fresh, But, they didn't do that, so, pretty stupid for that. But anyway, this was a pretty good episode for this adequate space show. That just goes to show that it didn't have to be this way. You could have just done adequate space show for Picard, and that would have been much more appreciated than the destruction that was wrought upon that character. But what's done is done, I guess. But anyway, here, let's try to make it up to you. Well, but yeah, this one was a pretty good episode for Picard season 3.